love Freaks and Geeks, though, you know? The funny thing about Freaks and Geeks was it was filmed a lot where I grew up. And one of the music instructor people they talk about, Terry Breeze, was mentioned in Freaks and Geeks, was the guy that taught me how to play drums. I don't know how to play drums. I know how to play guitar, but it's very funny that Freaks and Scott! Hey! You're here! All right, so go. Do your thing.
So I think we're going to test out the images here. And I think, are we at go time here? Is it like?
It is 6:30.
6:31. So I think we're all set.
We're late.
There's going to be somebody passing around some numbers. I actually have to apologize. I was hoping to make sure that everybody was included in the numbering. We're going to be giving prizes away at the end of the panel. Unfortunately, I was only able to number up to 100. So at the end of the panel, I'm going to call out 3 numbers from 1 to 100, and then I'm going to ask who did not get one. Then the first person to raise their hand or the first person I see will get the prize.
That seems dangerous.
I apologize. It's the best I'm able to do for right now. So I think we're going to start. Thank you very much for coming. I would like you all to imagine for a moment that today is an ordinary day in Chicago. Maybe you were downtown over at Nordstrom's, and you decided to walk over to Giordano's on Rush Street. As you're walking down the street, you notice there are 2 men running past you with handguns, following a third who gets shot down right in front of you. Or imagine that you're in the Pedway over by the metro station, over by the Chicago Cultural Center. And as you're there, you hear a shot ring out. When the shot rings out, you see somebody fall over dead and another person run away. Or, better yet, imagine it's Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. You decide you're going to go to Mass at Holy Name Cathedral. When you go in and you climb the stairs, as you get to the front door, you hear the sound of a machine gun, and a bunch of pieces of the wall in front of you shatters as bullets go through it. This was Chicago about 100 years ago, less than 100 years ago. And this was stuff that took place on a daily basis. One of the things that I want to talk about in this panel, besides just like ghost stories, is a lot of the sordid history of Chicago, some of the actual gangster history, and then what the paranormal experiences that followed from them. My name is Scott Larson. I am the writer and artist of the comic book series Visitations. Visitations is the history of Chicago as seen through the eyes of the residents of Chicago's oldest cemetery. I came up with the idea when I found out that I have some ancestors who are buried in Graceland Cemetery here in Chicago. I've been a comic book artist since 2005. And while I've been a comic book artist, I've worked on things like Kong, King of Skull Island. I worked on 1,000 Ways to Die, The Saint, and my work has been seen on the Fox TV show Proven Innocent. So I was at Graceland Cemetery, and I saw a whole bunch of different monuments, and I woke up one morning, and the idea for the comic book popped into my head. The comic book itself is, the characters are based on the monuments in Graceland Cemetery and other cemeteries throughout the world, so they're like a ghost Justice League. And so they have they solve crimes and they have adventures while the city grows and changes behind them. And I wanted to tell you about that because while I've been doing research for the book, I have real Chicago history in the book. While I've been doing research for the book, I've actually come across some real ghost stories and some real paranormal experiences. And I've also been a huge fan of different gangster things, and that's how this panel came about. And then with me today also are members of Locked Into Vacancy Entertainment. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Shane Hill. I'm the president of Locked Into Vacancy Entertainment.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Huddle, and I'm the artistic director of Locked Into Vacancy Entertainment.
And I'm Jen Walden, and I'm the managing director of Locked Into Vacancy Entertainment.
So this panel is divided into two parts. The first part is going to be some of the gangster stories, and the second part is going to be some of the things that Shane and Jennifer and Andy do when they're creating audio dramas or audio comedy shows in the style of old-time radio shows. So I have a question. Actually, it's funny. I can't see anybody because there's these lights blinding me. So you can all call out when I say this. How many people here came here on the Red Line and got off at McCormick and Cermak? Or actually, it's Chinatown Cermak. Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry. So how many people noticed the lack of buildings that are around as you walked here from the L? Does anyone know why there are no buildings around?
Ghosts.
No, sorry. Here's a secret about the city of Chicago. When something happens in a certain area of the city that's embarrassing, the powers that be will do everything they can to erase that memory, including tearing down buildings. The area that you walked through was the birthplace of organized crime. As you walk down Cermak, which used to be 22nd, you probably walked past a great big building called the Lex. That used to be the Lexington Hotel. That was Al Capone's headquarters. You also walk past many different places and all these different vacant spots, and those were spots where some terrible things in the city happened. Organized crime in Chicago was built at the turn of the century, and it was built on gambling and prostitution. There was a lot of scary things that happened that had absolutely nothing to do with ghosts. And one of the things that we tend to do when it comes to like gangster stories and all of these different exciting things is we tend to romanticize them. But there is nothing romantic about this. There were women who were lured into the city and with promises of marriage and jobs, and they were forced into the business. There were girls as young as 13, and the same thing well, they weren't promised marriage or jobs, but they were kidnapped from their homes, and they were also brought into this. And the person who was in charge of this was a guy named Big Jim Colosimo. Big Jim Colosimo was a brothel owner, but he also ran a restaurant, and it was called Colosimo's. You actually walked past it on your way here. It's now a place, it was right over on Wabash Avenue, like a half a block from Cermak, and it's a place called Tommy Gunn's Garage now. It's kind of like a dinner club in like a mobster style type of thing. And the thing with him, with Colosimo, was he ran this area. The area was known as the Levee. Or the Levee District. And all kinds of things happened. All those empty lots that you saw, those had all been buildings that had been brothels or gambling joints, and they had all been torn down by the city. And but he ran that area. When the city closed, the Levee started flying all over the place. I don't know how many innocent people were hurt, but there were a number of gangsters who just ended up dead on the streets of Chicago. Right over on Rush Street, right where you probably walk today. It was a bloodbath. And when Johnny Torrio was wounded gravely, he decided that he was going to give control of the gang over to Al Capone. Jaime Weiss took over O'Banion's gang, and this is Jaime Weiss here. The picture at the top is Jaime Weiss. He's a really handsome guy, as you can see. They continued to run the Northside gang out of the flower shop where O'Banion was, and Jaime Weiss was the only man that Al Capone feared. And what had happened was, one afternoon, while the Northside gang met in the flower shop, once their meeting ended at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they all left. As Jaime Weiss and two associates were walking down State Street, and you can see it in the picture here, You can see the buildings that are right there. You can see those lines going from the buildings. Those were where gunmen for the South Side gang were. And what they did was they just used machine guns, and they decided that Jaime Weiss was going to die. And so they shot and shot and shot and shot and shot and shot. And they hit the flower shop. They hit all of the buildings, including Holy Name Cathedral. And Jaime Weiss, as you can see in the bottom pictures, did not live through the experience. And the Northside Gang fell into the hands of a man named Bugs Moran. One of the things with the shooting is, if you take a look at these pictures, you can see the front of Holy Name Cathedral, and you can see there are bullet holes there. One is a picture from 1926 when this happened. The other one is a picture from today. As you can see, a bullet hole is still there. The Archdiocese tried to fill the bullet holes in, and rumor has it they were not successful. The bullet holes kept reappearing. I actually have a confession to make on this. I'm a big, not fan, but a big studier of this particular period in Chicago history. And I had gone to Holy Name for Stations of the Cross during Lent one year. And I had, as my friend and I were leaving, I was like, oh, let's find the bullet holes. And so I looked and looked and looked and looked and looked. And I found these little holes that went from the front to around the side of the church. And I thought, well, this is it. When I was doing research for this panel, and I was planning to say, oh, well, here's where the holes were, I saw these pictures, and there are these gigantic holes. So I don't know if what I saw was actually part of them, or if this was just it. So one of the things that happened with the flower shop, and the flower shop is down at the bottom of the screen there, is the Northside Gang stopped running their gang out of there. And the building fell into disrepair. It ended up changing hands left and right. And the Archdiocese got really tired of people coming to Mass and seeing bullet holes in the building and stopping and gawking at them. And so they eventually acquired the building and had it torn down. This is another example of Chicago trying to tear something down to hide its history. As you can see right next to it is a picture of the area as it stands now. I think they're about to build another building there, actually, but it became a parking lot for a while. So what happened next was infamous in the history of Chicago, and everyone's heard of it. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Everyone's heard of it, there's been a ton of books and a ton of movies about it. And what happened was this. It was Valentine's Day. It was about 10:30 in the morning, and Bugs Moran was going to be meeting with his gang in a garage on Clark Street. When he arrived at the garage, he noticed there was a car full of policemen outside of it, and so he quickly turned around and walked away. What happened next was this. The policemen walked into the garage. They surprised everybody inside the garage, and nobody was really doing anything. They were just kind of like sitting around playing cards. There was a mechanic there. There was an optometrist there, and these guys were taken to were put up against the wall. And then these two men in plain clothes, these two men who weren't in police uniforms, came in behind the police with machine guns and shot everybody who was standing up against the wall. And then the men who had used the machine guns turned around, put their hands up. The men dressed as police had shotguns. They were holding them to the guys' backs, and they walked out of the place. So it looked like the two men were being arrested by the police. They all got into a car, and they drove away. So you can see what the images are here. There's a picture of a dog here. He was the only surviving witness to the shooting, and the thing about that was the shooting drove him insane, and he had to be put down. Again, this is a grisly history. This isn't a fun thing. There's a lot of scary things here that have nothing to do with ghosts, but we are coming to the ghost stuff, I promise. There was one mobster who survived the shooting. And when the police showed up, the mobster said, well, what happened? And the mobster said, nothing, nobody shot me. And then he promptly died when he got to the hospital.
Okay.
So the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was the end of the Moran gang, and it was also inadvertently the end of Al Capone as well. One of the things that happened was the Moran gang, or the Northside gang, basically became this ragtag group of gangsters or petty thieves. And but with Capone, he got a lot of publicity for the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Now the truth is this: nobody knows what happened for sure. But Al Capone was blamed. He said he was innocent. Bugs Moran said he was guilty. He was in Florida at the time. He had an alibi, and they never found the men who did it. So there's some mystery surrounding all of this. But for Al Capone, it was the beginning of the end. And what had happened was he had a meeting with a bunch of different gangs throughout the country and in Atlantic City. And when he was coming back, there was a stop in Philadelphia, and he was arrested by the police for carrying a gun. It was like a handgun. And they sentenced him to a year in prison. While he was in prison, the federal government, who had already had a tax case that was building against him, ramped that up. The other thing that happened was the federal government started doing like real liquor raids. And so they hit him in two different ways. They hit him with his wallet, with the alcohol, and they hit him with the tax evasion charges. When Capone got back to the city, it was a different place. He didn't quite have the control he had had before. There were people he wasn't able to pay off that he had paid off before. The government built this case against him, and he was sentenced to prison for 11 years. While he was in prison, he didn't serve out the whole 11 years. He had contracted syphilis from his time as a bouncer in a brothel like many years before, and he left prison a broken man. One day the guards came in, he was staring up against the wall, and so he was released. He moved back to Florida. Eventually he died, and he came back to Chicago, or his body did. So I want to go back real quick to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre spot. I mentioned what happened, and again, nobody knows for sure what happened. It was supposed that Capone was in charge of it. There's a book out there about Machine Gun Jack McGurn talking about how he planned it. He was actually murdered on Valentine's Day a few years later. Capone's niece, over the course of the past few years, has come out publicly and said that he had nothing to do with it, that it was the police that did it. There's a book called Get Capone by Jonathan Egg, and he claims the same thing. He said, well, I found in these files that the police really did it. So nobody knows for sure. But there are a couple of things that happen with the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The first thing is the site itself. As you can see by the pictures here, there is the building itself, and then right next to it there's an empty lot. The city eventually tore the building down, just like they do with everything else that they're embarrassed of. So there's an empty lot there, but one of the things that happens is people will walk past the empty lot, and they will hear the sounds of screams, they will hear the sounds of gunfire. There are, when people are walking their dogs over there, the dogs start barking, they start getting worried, they're very agitated, and there's something about the area that is very, very, very uncomfortable. The other thing is the building was torn down, and you can see here in this picture there's a guy next to a bunch of bricks, and he's got a gigantic smile on his face. Well, those bricks were the bricks from the wall where the people were shot. And this was a guy who was a club owner in Canada, and he rebuilt the wall in the bathroom or something like that. And he had it there for a while, and it was all well and good. And then eventually he sold the club, they tore the building down, and he took the bricks and he started selling them one by one. And then people started sending them back. And the reason they sent them back was they claimed that their lives became worse once they got these bricks in their hands. There was talk of illness, financial issues, divorce, and everybody who had acquired the bricks decided that it wasn't worth it to have, and they sent it back. The picture that you see next to that is some of the bricks that, I guess it's in Las Vegas now. You can see what the bricks look like. You can see there's some red spots on there. I don't know if that's blood or not. My guess is it probably is not, but paint. But the wall stands today, I believe, in Vegas someplace. But that's one of the stories that was attached. The other one is this, and this is the one that I find really interesting. So Al Capone goes to prison at Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. And one day, he starts screaming bloody murder. And he's yelling, "Jimmy, go away. I didn't do it. Leave me alone." And it turns out that one of the victims of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, Bugs Moran's brother-in-law, his name was James Clark, or Jimmy Clark. The ghost started haunting Al. And the ghost haunted Al not only in Eastern State Penitentiary, and you can see that's Al Capone's, actually, Al Capone was treated very well when he was at Eastern State Penitentiary. You could see the regular cell there, and right next to it is a picture of what his cell looked like. They apparently rebuilt it, and there's stuff attached to Eastern State Penitentiary I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But so Jimmy Clark started harassing Al Capone in Eastern State Penitentiary. Al Capone came back to the Lexington Hotel, the place that all you people walked past earlier today. And the ghost followed him there, and he would start screaming. And he was screaming, and his bodyguards would come in. "Jimmy Clark is harassing me. I'm being haunted," blah, 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 on and on and on and on and on. So here's the question. If Al Capone was not responsible for the murders at the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, why was he being haunted by a ghost? I was at an event a few years ago, and as I mentioned, while I've been doing the comic, I've run across people who would classify themselves as ghost hunters, people who would classify themselves as people who speak to spirits. And there was somebody at one of the events, and he had apparently spoken to many former mob bosses. Including ones that had lived in the 50s and the 60s. And one of the people he talked to was Jimmy Clark. And he asked him, now one of the things when this guy is talking to ghosts, there's not a great big conversation. It's not like I'm talking to you and you're talking to me. There's a lack of energy there, apparently. And as he was talking, he's getting like one-word answers. So he could ask questions, he would get a yes, a no, blah, 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 blah. And he asked the question, "Jimmy, Al Capone wasn't involved in this." And apparently Jimmy Clark agreed with him. And he said to him, "Well, why were you haunting him?" And Jimmy Clark's ghost said, "I didn't know that at the time. I thought he was guilty, but apparently he was innocent." Draw your own conclusions on that one. So as I had mentioned, Al Capone passed away, and he was brought to Chicago, and he was buried in Mount Carmel Cemetery. And one of the things with Al Capone is he is infamous. He's so infamous that they had to move his gravestone a couple of times. People had stolen it, which people do things like that. When Charlie Chaplin died, somebody stole his body. But that's a side note. But Al Capone has been seen throughout Chicago and the Chicagoland area. One of the places Al Capone has been seen is at Mount Carmel Cemetery, where he's buried. There are a bunch of different gangsters buried there. Dino Banyan, who I mentioned earlier, is buried there. Machine Gun Jack McGurn, who I mentioned earlier, is buried there. Jaime Weiss is buried there. So all of the gangsters, whether they're North or South Side gangs, are all buried in the same cemetery. But he's been seen there. On YouTube, there is a video of an EVP. And in this video, something near Capone's grave says, "Shoot it, shoot it." There's other stories attached to that cemetery that I'd be more than happy to tell you, but I want to make sure that these guys have time to talk about stuff too. So I'm here all weekend. I'd be happy to talk to you about anything. The other place that Al Capone has been seen in is the Congress Hotel. The Congress Hotel, he owned part of it, and he used to run like meetings and like liquor things out of the Congress, and he's been seen sitting at the bar. The Congress itself, if anyone has been to some of the panels that I've done previously, we've talked about the Congress extensively. There are a lot of different stories attached to the Congress Hotel. Floating lights, changes in temperature, uneasy feelings. There's a little boy that's been seen on the 12th floor, and the story behind him, his mother apparently killed him and then committed suicide, and he haunts the 12th floor. But those are just a couple stories attached to the Congress Hotel. And then the other place Capone has been seen has been at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. Bachelor Grove is another hotbed of paranormal activity. Bachelor Grove is famous for ghost lights, time slips, disappearing houses. There's a photograph of somebody sitting on a rock who wasn't there when the picture was taken. It was taken like by a Sun-Times photographer. So there's a lot of different stories about this. Apparently, Capone's Southside gang used Bachelor's Grove as a dumping ground for bodies, which is interesting considering how many bodies they left in the street. But he's been seen, there's a lagoon there, he's been seen circling the lagoon. The other place Capone has been seen is, he's been seen at Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. I think that any place where he was, his ghost has been seen. But the thing with the Eastern State Penitentiary, like Bachelor's Grove, like the Congress Hotel, and even like Mount Carmel, is it's a hotbed of paranormal activity. There were prisoners who were tortured in there, and there were things that happened, like people's tongues being like attached to their wrists, like chained to their wrists, and they were thrown into solitary confinement known as the Hole. And so there's all kinds of different things, but Capone has been seen there as well. So one of the other things is that, I talked about these buildings that have been torn down, and I've talked about, especially with the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, excuse me, St. Valentine's Day Massacre, there seems to be this residual energy that stuck around the area. Between the gunfire and the screams and everything else. That kind of stuff happens all the time. There's different kinds of hauntings that take place. There's the hauntings kind of things, but then there's stuff where it's almost like a memory being replayed over and over and over again. With the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, it's a sound. But there are images as well. If you want to take a look at the screen here, John Dillinger was not a gangster. He was not part of any gang. He was a criminal. He was a bank robber. He was wanted in 4 different states. He had been imprisoned, and he escaped twice. The FBI actually didn't like the notoriety he was getting, because what he was doing was he was like basically robbing from banks and people who were hurting poor people during the Depression. Which isn't to say he was a good guy. He wasn't. But he wasn't a murderer. And he wasn't a gangster, but he was a criminal. And the FBI pegged him as public enemy number 1. They wanted him caught, and they finally caught him outside the Biograph Theater. Biograph is now known as the Victory Gardens Theater. But he was seeing a Clark Gable movie, and he came out of the theater, and the FBI guys were there. He drew his gun and started running down the alley. The FBI guys started chasing him. There were like 3 FBI guys who were chasing him. They started shooting at him. They shot 2 innocent bystanders. 2 women were shot before they finally got Dillinger. They shot him 4 times, and he fell over, dead, and it was all done. When he died, because he was such a spectacle, because he was so famous, people walked over to the body, and even after the body was taken away, there was a pool of blood in the alley, and they started like taking the handkerchiefs and soaking their handkerchiefs in the blood, and doing the same thing with newspapers because they wanted a souvenir. If anybody just saw the Death of Versace, which is on Netflix, they did something similar to him because people are famous, people want a piece of history. And the FBI, in a very, very, very unusual move, put the body on public display. And you can see here, there's the Biograph Theater that night. There's the pool of blood that's there in the alley. And people walked by Dillinger's body for like 2 days. And then it was eventually given to his father in Indiana and buried. But one of the things about Dillinger is he didn't leave, apparently he never left the alley. So one of the things that happens is people walk by the alley and they'll look down and they will see a man fall to the ground, you know, kind of spiral out. And like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, it's this image that continues to repeating. It's almost like a film that's watched over and over and over. And with events like this, with these kinds of paranormal events, what happens is eventually the energy disappears. So it'll be strong and then it'll get weaker and weaker and weaker as time goes on, and then eventually it'll just dissipate. And it's kind of, that's why nobody sees Roman soldiers walking around or anything like that. If there were any true ghost stories attached to that, then that energy would have faded. So with that happy-go-lucky story, we have some real comedy here with the with the cast of Locked Into Vacancy Entertainment.
I've got a real great transition here for you.
Okay.
Hot tip, when you go visit the church, don't stick your finger in the bullet holes.
Why?
Real gross, you'll get the plague. Everybody does.
Yeah, it's not clean.
Oh.
Not clean.
And also, my great-grandfather was part of the North Side Gang, and he was also a Chicago police officer and transported booze in the back of his cop car during Prohibition.
And what was his name?
Huh?
And what was his name?
Daniel Barry.
Okay.
Daniel Barry. It's part of your next episode.
That's right.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why the members of Locked Into Vacancy are here is with the comic book that I've done, I'm trying to do something different in every single issue. And what I did in the latest issue was I did a fully painted story, and they recorded an audio drama of the same story told from a different perspective. And so when we were doing the panel, I asked them very nicely if they would come and join me here, and they very nicely said yes. So do you guys want to talk a little bit about
Sure.
your company?
Sure, yeah. Like I said in the beginning, you know, I'm the president of the company, and one of the things that I really wanted to say with a lot of your history that you said is a lot of history also in the same time period with what happened with Al Capone and everything was the history of radio that came out of Chicago. Chicago was such a hotbed of media that came out of there. So if you can imagine like the internet being from one source, it was the same thing like back in the 30s and the 40s, the way that our radio signals and everything came out of Chicago. It was such a big source of entertainment and information for people around the country. And so that's why when stories that you talk about, like with Al Capone and everything, that's why they've been dramatized and people have really celebrated them, rightfully so, I mean, I guess, and maybe not so rightfully so with the violence, but you know, with the birthplace of radio being in Chicago, that's one of the things that our company, that what we've really tried to do with podcasting and everything is we've really tried to embrace that and embrace the old-time radio spirit and the way the birth of sitcoms kind of came out of that. And that's why it was such a great marriage with what you're doing with the old time, with a lot of the history with Chicago, with the cemeteries and the stories that you're talking about, and then the style that we're doing. A lot of people, if you haven't had a chance yet, if you get a chance to pick up the next edition of Visitations, you'll really find that with what Scott has been talking about and the ghost stories and things, it also lends to that kind of feel, that kind of genre of what Chicago entertainment has been about. And that's what Locked Into Vacancy we really try to also embrace, is really trying to embrace not only the nostalgic, but take that style and carry it into what we're doing now. And that's why it's really been, it was such a fun project to do, to take and make your story and really take it to life. And I guess I also want to say thank you to Andy and Jen too, because a lot of their hard work has been to really promote and to really bring this to life, that you guys will all hear when you purchase the book. And
so I have a question. What made you decide to do a stage show based on old time radio?
Yeah. So I mean,
Well, before you answer that question, when did you start? How long have you guys been doing this?
well, about 5 years. 5 years now we've been doing it.
Yeah, we're almost at 6.
I think we're at
Yeah,
6.
we're almost at 6.
I've been here 5, which means it's been
You've
6.
been here 5, which means 6. We started because a lot of with what podcast has been doing is really bringing a lot of the internet technology has really brought a lot of almost nostalgic. Well, with bringing the nostalgic radio experience, where people would sit around and listen to the storytelling, and what we've been doing has been taking a lot of original storytelling and comedy and drama and bringing it to your ears through podcasting, embracing what people used to do back in the 40s and stuff. And so that's what we really decided to embrace that kind of swell of what's been going on. I mean, unless you guys got something else to say for that.
Well, I think also just the fact that podcasts are so prevalent now, and it's almost all of it, and where it started was very, what am I trying to say? Like NPR and factual and stuff you should know. There wasn't any really creativity in it. There was no fictional stuff.
There's so much like interviews and people kind of spouting out their opinions and stuff like that, that they're really, the fictional podcast was really kind of few and far between. And I know, Shane grew up, listening to a lot of these old-time radio shows like The Shadow and The Saint, and ones like that were just so creative and so interesting, when really the only medium that you really have to work with is, the audio. And it's really just kind of creating that image and those stories like in your imagination and in your mind. And that, nowadays, in the podcasting world, there's really not anywhere near as much of that as, obviously, as there used to be back in the golden age of radio.
Yeah.
We're the Lego of entertainment. You know why Legos were invented is so children could use their imagination and like build. So we're
we've
the
got
Lego of entertainment.
a new name for, a new...
Yeah. I mean, and one of the things with audio, with what we're doing, and a lot of what Scott's doing, is taking something that is already there, but expounding on what is there and really exploring what could be. And that's what I think a lot of entertainment now that you can see on Netflix and everything, well, it's great, but the audio media right now has really been so amazing, because it's a rebirth of that your brain and your imagination can create these scenes and connect the dots and really make an amazing story already there. We don't need to have everything spoon-fed to us. We can use something that is just an inspiration, and that is why this project, to me, is so amazing, because I know with what Scott did and with what you looked at, just looking at headstones and the history of Chicago that's so fruitful and so amazing, and just looking at headstones and saying what could be, that is what is amazing. And that's why audio drama and audio fiction and audio performance really helps to allow you to connect the dots. It's not spoon-fed. It's maybe we have amazing audio effects that really helps to it. We have amazing storytelling, but your brain is really what makes that story amazing in the end. And that's what I really enjoy about this audio drama, this audio fiction.
So,
And,
so sorry.
No.
Tell us about War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah, a little bit. We got commissioned by the Chicago Public Library. They have a program called One Book, One Chicago that's happening all year, yeah?
Yeah.
And as part of that, for October, which was War of the Worlds' 80th anniversary, they had us recreate it in their gorgeous, gorgeous theater. So we took it, we massaged it a little, we trimmed it a little, we updated it a tiny bit with sound effects, but we did most of them old school with Foley.
Yeah, live Foley, live music. We had, a cadre of our talented performers, and it was great, really being able to kind of like recreate that. But we also had a little bit of stage lighting as well to kind of add to the theatrical experience as well. And actually, it was really great too because we even got to release it on the actual 80th anniversary of the original broadcast of War of the Worlds, which was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Which you can find on our website, lockedintovacancy.com.
So, Andy, do me a favor. Explain what Foley is.
Foley, I'd be happy to. Foley is actually making practical sound effects and you can use, we have a very, very talented Foley artist named Ellie Maitland, who is gracing us in our front row here. And it's always uncanny the way that she will take like everyday objects. She's the MacGyver of sound.
Yeah. What's it?
Never mind.
A lot of people have seen, you've probably seen people who have done the footprints or the shoe steps or the door slamming, and that's the stuff that we really do. I mean, it's kind of like we could do a digital, but I know, and it's kind of funny because Ellie is such a purist, and there's a reason why it is called Foley Artist, because it's such an art to it. Foley is actually the last name of the guy that is kind of credited to being the first sound effect person, but a lot of what we're doing, I mean, we could go out there and we could find laser beams and we could find things, but there's something so pure and so natural about having that. And that's why, I mean, we've been so blessed with having Ellie Maitland to be, I mean, she's one of the true people that enjoys it for the art and not just for doing what it is. And so if you really want a chance to really hear somebody who's been trying to really get into that touch with the history as well as the art of it, that's something that Ellie has really been thankful for. So thank you, Ellie.
Absolutely.
And fun fact, in Visitations, there's actually a horse, and she actually uses coconut shells, Monty Python style.
It's true.
As well as the werewolf noise.
Yeah.
And and it's every month, because we do a monthly show that Ellie performs with us, and it's just the things that she does to make certain sounds, like, honestly, like, blows me away every single time. Just this past show, she's I won't necessarily spoil what you did, just but she made like squealing tires. And it just sounded like just so crisp and so perfect.
A water bottle?
Yeah. Like,
well, we're not going to give all your secrets
We don't want to
away.
give them all
You
away,
can come
but-
see her live April 5th at Stage 773.
So talk about the music. How do you guys do music?
Well, we have a very talented musician named Gail Gallagher, who performs with us as well. Woo. She very, very talented. Basically what we like is just a good underscoring. In Visitations, we very much harken back to the old style, where in between scenes there would be a very, very long, dramatic, musical interlude, that would go on for a couple minutes. It's like 1 or 2 minutes doesn't seem like a lot, But when you're just listening to nothing but music in between scenes, it can feel like a long time. And so with Visitations, we very much tried to kind of harken back to that kind of older style with much longer interludes in between. But for like our normal show, we try to have just kind of a good underscoring that Gail, we're very blessed to be working with her. She just kind of has like a sixth sense for.
Yeah, well, and we actually do our own songs occasionally too.
Also true.
So we have 2 serials that are singing serials.
That's true.
One coming up on April 5th, guys. But we have Andy and Tony that write the songs with Gail. And yeah, all original. They're super amazing. I don't know how you guys pull up or come out with that. It's great though.
Something I really want to kind of bring across to, and this is for you guys and everybody who's seeing our show, is during the 40s and the 50s, you didn't have TV really was a thing. So the entertainment that American families had was the radio. And so if you kind of think about how things came into your entertainment once a week and everything, I mean, think about the logistics of it. And it was very, you didn't have a lot of time to produce a lot of things. And all of us that have been involved in it, we've come from stage performance, we've come from street performance where we do a lot of interactive stuff, but this is such a genre that it's been neglected to where we're trying to explore what can be done, not only in the realm of the possibilities of the script, but what can be done logistically with time. And that's where me as a producer, I've been very blessed to have people who can understand, okay, we might not always have the greatest amount of time, so let's see what we can do with what we have. And that is exactly what people like Orson Welles and other people who have done the radio back in the 30s and the 40s, they didn't really know exactly what they had, and so they were trying to do the best they can do just to get a product out once a week and everything. And that's what we've really been trying to explore. And that's why, again, to bring it back to what Visitations is that it's a touch of that nostalgic in the history of Chicago that makes us so different and so amazing compared to what a lot of other people have. Like the early 20th century and the history and what we're trying to do is really touches on this purity and this genuine creativity using a new venue or new media that has just been amazing. And that's why, I know I'm rambling on it, but I want to thank Andy and Jen and Ellie and everybody who's really been there to help us take with what's been thrown against us and say, how can we interpret this?
And I will say too that we do all of this pretty much in a month. So with Visitations, Andy and Scott got together and wrote it in, how long did you guys do it?
Well, Scott actually brought a script to me, and I took some time and kind of adapted it into a radio script and really kind of fleshed out like the Foley and the music and things like that, as well as just making sure that it ended on a very dramatic, kind of lead off so that, they'll tune in next week to find out, kind of a lead off.
Yeah, well, and then we had one read through, we had one rehearsal, and in that same rehearsal, we recorded the whole thing. So, yeah, it keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, it was very different from just performing it live, like we do every single month. I definitely a different experience, but also kind of exciting at the same time.
Yeah.
So I have one more question, and then I know that I've promised prizes to people as a reward for sitting through this. So you guys obviously you did my thing, you did War of the Worlds, but your monthly show is a comedy show. What do you prefer? A comedy or drama? Because I've heard you do both, but it seems to me that your stuff kind of falls more towards the comedy. Which one is harder?
That's a great question. I would say drama is really more difficult for me personally, because I am also a performer, because I feel like comedy allows for you to have more knee-jerk reactions and more what the absurd of what happens in the moment, but I think drama really has to touch in to the human spirit and to what's really going on in the moment. Doing War of the Worlds and doing Visitation, which allows us to do more drama, really allowed us to say, you know, what is the intention? What is the purpose of the scene? Where a lot of comedy, a lot of things can tend to be, what is the most absurd thing that we can say? You know, we try not to go blue, we try to keep it PG-13, but I think a lot of times it's easy to make that kind of, I mean, you know what I'm saying, that kind of reaction. But I think drama really, it's us as a society, we're so conditioned to not allow for feelings to come out, that I feel like when you're trying to bring drama to the surface and really try to express it to people, it's really difficult because we are conditioned to not bring that forward, that it's kind of like you almost feel like you're force feeding people, but you're not. You're trying to expose yourself. And that's why I think drama can tend to be difficult, and it is a challenge. But I will tell you that everybody that we've worked with has been so excited to do that challenge. So.
I'm going exact opposite. I'm saying comedy's harder.
Really?
Because y'all lunatics like to improvise.
But you're funny as
Nothing
shit.
else.
You're funny as shit. I don't get it. That's. Yeah.
No, we do. Same with our regular monthly show. We do have a read-through, we have one rehearsal, we have the final rehearsal, and then we go. But the script keeps changing because Andy's amazing and likes to update funny things that we
She means I'm a perfectionist and that I just tend to rewrite things a lot, so.
And I tend to be a perfectionist and be like, no, you have to make this shorter and you have to do this. So.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
and then
how that
we've got the improv that just comes up, and we've got audience reactions and people laughing at things that we didn't think they were going to laugh at, or not laughing at things that we thought they were going to laugh at, which is, it's tough. It's tough to gauge until you're up there doing it.
And if you don't mind, I know you're going to do your prizes too, but I also want to offer up to, because this is such a new thing too, that if anybody's got any questions about.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. Does anyone have, besides me asking all these annoying questions, does anyone have any real questions for the gang here about how a radio show is made, or an audio drama or audio comedy?
We can't see, so just shout.
Microphone. I know there's a microphone over there.
We got one right up here, too.
What, are you going to carry it out there for?
That doesn't sound
You can do your calisthenics and carry it out.
calisthenics.
Yeah, I was actually just wondering what the name of your website was. I didn't catch it when she said it.
You can do it.
It's lockedintovacancy.com. We have stickers up here that you can get it too.
Yeah.
LockedIntoVacancy.com.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay, because I'm a big War of the Worlds guy, and I definitely want to check out that recreation.
Yeah,
Cool.
it was fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
For War of the Worlds. I mean,
I will tell you, as the director of that, I tried to keep it as close as I could to the original production of War of the Worlds. So, I mean, a lot of people I know have tried to modernize it, but we tried to keep it as close as we could. So I'm very proud of it. You can find it at lockedintovacancy.com.
And I will say, as a lady, we did update it to where there are a lot of parts that we changed to being women, which was extra special and awesome.
yeah.
Does anyone sound like Orson Welles in it?
Sorry?
Does anyone sound like Orson Welles in it?
Yes.
Yes, the French.
French.
We actually have Tony Pellegrino, who plays the role of that Orson Welles played, was very good. And what I tried to tell him to do is to make the role as his own, but not do an imitation of Orson Welles, if that makes sense, because I feel like that is more truth to the script of what Howard E. Cook wrote with the script. But I will say that a lot of the delivery is very much to that, you know.
Real good affectation.
Yeah. So,
Maurice LaMarche would have been happy.
yes. If Maurice LaMarche is here, he
No.
told me he was going to.
Come on, Maurice.
One side note about War of the Worlds, one of the things that I try not to do during this panel is I try not to talk about my book too much, because we're doing this for you guys, we're not doing it for ourselves. And so the book is important to me, but it's brought me a lot of knowledge about stuff that you guys are interested in. But with my book, I was a big fan of War of the Worlds as well. And for the 50th anniversary, they started a syndicated TV show called War of the Worlds. And the characters in my book are actually named after the characters from that TV show, because I love that show so much. It was like this cheesy late 80s sci-fi TV show. But almost all of the characters in my book in one form or another are named after the characters on that TV show. Any more questions?
Hi, thanks for doing this panel. It's been really informative. I was wondering, what is one piece of advice, or if you prefer 4 pieces of advice, if you each want to give one, because I imagine your answers are quite different. What's one piece of advice that you would give to an amateur podcaster, somebody who wants to start out?
That's a very good question. One of the things I would say is just do it. I mean, just start putting stuff together, listen to what you're doing. But know what you're delivering, because I will tell you that I listen to so many different things. Every night before I go to bed, I listen to different old-time radio shows, but I also listen to a lot of recent podcasters. But I would also say is what makes you different. The thing is there's so many journalistic podcasts out there right now. There's so many things about true crime or how to make your next, all your money. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the true crime. I just got super excited about it. But the thing is what is important to you, because it will come through. If you're making a podcast that you're passionate about, it will come through and people will understand with what you're doing. But don't give up, and don't forget that you can retry things. I mean, you're not going to get it right out of the gate. It's going to be a thing that you're going to have to tweak and you're going to have to see. And you can try and say, okay, I tried this, maybe I try another way. But just understand that, but also embrace the community, because podcasting community right now is really a thing that it's a grassroots thing. It's a thing where people are trying to support that. As far as technical, honestly, I would say get a good software and get a microphone and eat eggs. I will say eat eggs, because you take the cartons and you can build a sound booth thing out of it.
Did not.
I know it sounds funny, but it's true. You don't need to buy a $150, $200 thing for your sound, but just get something and practice and keep trying it, and then get feedback from people. If you have a topic and you want to start talking about it, just start talking about it.
My advice is eat bacon.
Solid advice.
It's delicious, that's all. But no, honestly, my piece of advice is don't get married necessarily to anything.
Ever.
The man who just got engaged said don't get married.
To any particular thing, because a big thing is, I'm being serious. A big thing is just really being able to adapt. And being able to kind of, not necessarily like being okay with changing. Any kind of, stop it. I feel you smiling at me right now, and I hate it.
Clearly, drama is hard for Andy.
And I would say, I think comedy is hard as hell, because I have to be the funny guy, and that's difficult. But honestly, though, I will say just don't get too upset if you do need to change something, if you do need to make changes from your original design and your original dream, because those changes can actually, even though you may be adverse to them at the onset, in the long run, looking back kind of with 20/20 vision, you can see that might have ended up being the best thing.
Yeah, I'll go with just do it. Seriously, you just need to do it. It's never going to be perfect, and you're never going to know what's going to work until you put it out there and ask people if it works.
No,
I'm not a podcaster, and quite frankly, hearing the sound of my own voice echoing back to me through this is like frightening. But I will say this: I'm a creative person. I'm an artist, and there was a point in my life, and I generally don't talk about personal stuff like this, but there was a point in my life where I decided that I was going to draw comic books for a living. And I remember it. And I remember being at home. I was in my bedroom in my parents' house. And I was looking in the mirror and I thought, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I sat down and I started drawing. My drawing sucked back then. But I just did it every single day, and I tried to learn as much as humanly possible as time went on. And you have these big lapses where you start to do something creative and then you stop for whatever reason, and then you go back to it, or you get to a point where it's like, I'm not good enough, I have to learn more. And I think that stuff applies not only to comic book art but also to any kind of art form. You're always learning, you're always changing, and every day is a brand new beginning. No matter what, you're always starting over. So, I'm not a podcaster, but as far as any kind of creative thing is concerned, you just start.
Yeah.
Start and then see where you go from there.
One of the things, and if I could kind of off of there's the saying that if you do 1,000 hours of something, you become a master of it. But the thing is you can just do 1 hour of something or 10 minutes of something, and you can find something in that is important to you, that is something you can improve on. I mean, one of the things that I think we've all of us said is, we look back at what we used to do and it sucked. No offense, because that's what I do. But the thing is take what you've done and embrace what is important and you enjoy at that time and improve on that. Take other things as opportunities to improve and say, how can I tweak this and make it better? But don't throw anything away. Look back and say, how can I improve on that and stuff? And then after your 1,000 hours, you can look back and say, yeah, it might not be as great, but still enjoy that as your foundation. And I think the basis of it is just do it. Start doing it, So hopefully that answers.
C2E2 people, how much time do we have left?
None.
None.
It's over.
Say your numbers, Scott, say your numbers.
I'm going to. So number 15. Does anyone have 15? Oh, she's already got it anyway. She bought it this afternoon. Okay, let's try number 24. 24. Come up, please.
Yay.
I can't see anything. Okay, so there's
It's
no...
all right, you're not supposed to see. What are you seeing?
Okay, how about 32? Anyone have 32? Clearly I didn't have to worry about numbering all of these things. Let's try number 12. Oh wait, I did that already, didn't I? Okay, you've got it already too. I'm sorry.
There's 3 people to raise your hands.
Okay.
32, we got 32 right there.
Woo!
Done.
Oh, well, here, both of you guys.
We have so many 32s.
Yeah.
So what this is it is a copy of Visitations number 4. It's a copy of some of the pinups that I have done, and also a copy of the script that Locked Into Vacancy did for the audio. One thing with this, and I need to mention this really, really quickly, is there's a printing mistake in the comic book, and there were only a limited number of these printed. So, however popular the book becomes, it becomes more valuable. So, spread it around so these guys can make some money off of this and send their kids to college someday.
Are we getting paid?
No. We got experience.
Exposure.
We get paid in exposure.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys so much.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
I would like to say to everybody that we are selling these t-shirts too. Unfortunately, we did not bring them down today, but if you are interested in these t-shirts, which is the artwork that Scott has done.
Anybody else want one? Okay, come on.
Wow, okay, apparently
Sorry.
That's what they want.
Also, I do have, I'm happy to talk about any ghost stories walking out. I do have copies of the book if anyone's interested
We
in taking a
do.
look at it.
They look
but
like this
we're getting
and
out of
like other
this room.
Yeah,
So,
if you're interested in these t-shirts, find Scott's booth. We'll have some over there too.
Right, well, there's no booth today. It's out tomorrow. Hallway.